Hey, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, a lot of people have been sharing and talking about this post that appeared to be from Chris Bumstead's Twitter. But if you just check the account, it's not Chris's actual Twitter. But this stirred up quite a conversation. Even though Chris didn't actually say this or tweet this himself, this has been shared by like every bodybuilding Instagram page at some point over the past day or so. And it's a picture of Chris holding his Olympia medal, and the caption says, "The question is, hang it up or bring one more home." Now, there's a couple reasons why so many people were talking about this. And again, Chris didn't actually post this, but it does come after, the prep for the Olympia, where Chris was saying it was the most difficult prep he's ever had. And then Chris won the Olympia, obviously, number 5, relatively easily. Ramon is a great classic physique competitor, but I really feel like the gap between Chris, Ramon, and everybody else is a pretty big one. And I think Chris said it best at the press conference. He knows that everybody else is just fighting for second place. So I think that this idea and this topic was so interesting to people because of the fact that what does Chris have to prove still? Realistically, Chris can probably go on to win as many as he chooses to win. I think he could win for the next 3 years and become an 8-time classic physique champ and tie the open bodybuilding record. But this post also came just days after Chris announced that him and Courtney are having a baby, which seems like that would make the idea of retirement even more enticing to Chris. And you got to consider the fact that the classic physique Olympia prize money, $50,000 to win that show. If the prep for Chris really is that stressful, that difficult, and now he's going to have a kid in the midst of his next Olympia prep, at what point is it no longer worth it for Chris to compete? Like the diminishing returns, obviously, through other means, sponsorships, his supplement company, Chris is making way, 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 way more than $50,000 a year, whether he competes or not. With 5 classic Olympia titles, he's pretty much solidified as the standard for classic physique. If he retired this year, I don't think it would change his legacy or his status or his ability to earn one bit. But if he wins a 6th title, the question is, does that change anything at all for him? Does that make him earn more? Does that change his business? Does that do that much for him to win a 6th title instead of 5 and then get an additional $50,000? And then there's also this idea, I saw Sean Ray talking about this on the Cutler cast, about Chris going to open bodybuilding and what that would do for his legacy. And people have even speculated that Chris would have had a chance of winning the Open Olympia this year. And obviously, he's had health issues in the past. Probably pushing his body for open bodybuilding wouldn't be the safest, healthiest, smartest decision. But as far as another Olympia prep goes, what would it do for Chris's legacy to win a 6th classic title versus potentially winning an open title or just even being in the conversation? If Chris were top 3 in open, I feel like that would be gigantic for his legacy. Not to mention even just placing top 3. If he were to place top 3 in the Open Olympia, that's $100,000. So just off the prize money alone, it would be double what he would win for classic physique for winning the show. Now, if he won the Open Olympia, $400,000, that's 8 times the classic physique prize money. Now, that is significant. Now, do I think Chris would compete in the Open Olympia next year and win the Open Olympia? Honestly, probably not. Do I think there's a real, honest probability that he could be in the first call-out at the Open Olympia? Yes, I do believe he could be a first call-out guy there. And I guess the other question, too, is how much difference in risk, really, tangibly, is there between prepping for classic physique at the Olympia level and prepping for open bodybuilding? There is a difference, but how much of a difference is it really from a health standpoint to do one Olympia prep for open? And you got to consider, from the fan perspective, how exciting the possibility is. Because keep in mind, Chris is being coached by Hani Rambod. Just think, what if the top 3 at next year's Olympia for open bodybuilding was Hadi, Derek, and Chris Bumstead, all 3 of Hani's best athletes. And I don't know exactly what Chris weighs on stage, but I think it's around 230 for classic physique. So let's just say for open, he was 240 or closer to 250. it's not like he's too small for open. There's a lot of guys that are in that range. Now, obviously, Samson is like a 300-pounder. But I don't think because Chris is a classic guy, if he did open, I don't think he'd look that small in an open lineup. So I just think there's a lot of interesting possibilities to consider when you talk about Chris Bumstead. You talk about retiring or winning another Classic Physique Olympia title, going to open. I think Chris can really do anything he wants to do. If he wants to keep competing in Classic, if he thinks it's worth it to him, I think he could probably win 10. He could probably win 5 more. Because I think what people don't really consider, because Chris has been around for so long, in that he's been winning for so long, he's been on top, everybody knows him, is how young Chris really still is. He's only 28. And he's already won 5 titles. He could take 3 years off to grow into open bodybuilding and still only be 31 by the time he makes his open bodybuilding debut. If he won 10 Classic Physique titles, so he won 5 more years, he would only be 33 with 10 Olympia titles. That's how young Chris is. And that's why all these conversations around Chris are so interesting, because the possibility is there. Now, of course, anything could happen, an injury, an illness, to prevent him from being in his prime in his 30s. So obviously, there's all these what-if factors that could happen. But when you think about that, and people say that bodybuilders don't even hit their physical prime until mid to late 30s, so 35 to 40, could you imagine if Chris won 10 Classic Physique Olympia titles? So he's 33. Then when he's 34, he goes to the Open Olympia, and then he's in his prime and wins the Open Olympia. Does Chris go down as the greatest bodybuilder in the history of the sport? He's already the most followed by a long shot, with the exception of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but Arnold has been around 50 years more than Chris Bumstead and has Hollywood behind those followers too. There's just so many interesting things, and I really don't think that the Hani Rambod factor should be discounted, because Hani brought the first ever crossover champion, Derek Lunsford, from winning 212 pounds to winning the Open Olympia. He had a much smaller starting point with Derek as far as just overall size to go to open than with Chris. Chris is much bigger than Derek, or was when they started. So if Hani can do that with Derek, what's to say he can't do that with Chris? And who's to say if anybody can do it? Hani's the guy that's going to bring Chris to the Open. Hani's the guy to do it. He's the guy for the job. He just did it with Derek. So Chris has all the tools. He has time on his side. He's in a very comfortable financial situation. He would be going into the Open Olympia with more Olympia titles than anybody else from Classic, but still. I think we could see in our lifetime as bodybuilding fans potentially one of the most exciting bodybuilding outcomes of all time if Chris Bumstead went to open bodybuilding. If Chris were to win the Open Olympia, I don't think there would ever have been a more exciting Olympia win than if that happened. Now, next up in the news, I wanted to talk about this update from Samson Dauda at 4 days out from the EVLS Prague Pro, which will be his 4th pro show this year. I'm very excited about what Samson is doing, especially after I watched an interview with Milos. Milos is coaching Samson, obviously, and Milos was saying that Samson told him that the reason he's doing it is not for the prize money, but because he wants to support and promote bodybuilding, and he wants these shows that are relatively smaller shows to have the star power of a top Olympian at those shows so that the fans have something exciting to watch and that the level of competition is higher, and that he wants things to be kind of like how they were back in the day, because nowadays you don't really see the Olympia champs or the top guys at the Olympia competing after the Olympia. They all pretty much, for the most part, shut it down until the next Olympia and focus solely on that. So it's very rare that you see these top 3 guys compete in shows outside of that. So I really respect that that's what Samson wants to do, and I think he probably will win this Prague Pro. Based on what we're seeing here, he looks very impressive. He looks like he's holding on to his conditioning. He is also committed to the Arnold Classic UK and the Arnold Ohio, which, that is, again, very impressive that he's doing all these shows. But that reasoning for me is what makes me root for Samson. That's what I like to see. I still remember there was a show called the Shiru Classic that was right after the Olympia, and you would get to see like an Olympia rematch the very next week or maybe 2 weeks after, whatever it was. And I remember Phil and Kai would do that show, and they'd have a rematch right after the Olympia. Those days are kind of gone. You just don't see these post-Olympia tours with all the Olympia champs or all the top guys in them. You just don't see it anymore. So Samson is trying to bring that back, and I really respect and appreciate that. Because that was around the time that I started to really follow bodybuilding. It was like 2011, 2012. And I remember that after the Olympia, the excitement wasn't over. You would have like these rematch shows where the top guys would go straight into another show after the Olympia. So you had like this post-Olympia excitement that you don't really have this year. Things feel very final after the Olympia now. Like the year's kind of over and you're not going to see the stars until maybe the Arnold and then next year's Olympia. So I respect that Samson is doing that, and I believe him when he says that, because the prize money at these shows that he's doing is only like $10,000. Keep in mind, he won the Arnold Classic, which was $300,000, and third place at the Olympia gave him $100,000. So with the Romania victory, that puts him at $410,000 in prize money for the year. So he's already made more prize money than if he had won the Olympia. So he's clearly not doing these $10,000 shows for the $10,000. He's doing it for the love of the game, and I think that's very commendable. All right, so the final story that I have for you guys today, Flex Lewis just turned 40, and he gave his 40th birthday physique update. So he was talking about how he wanted to do like a little mini transformation for this 40th birthday, and he wanted to show off a very impressive physique after not training consistently for a while. I think he said he was still eating consistently and doing consistent cardio, but he wanted to do this little transformation for 40, so he shows off in that cover picture there the physique that he attained in his little mini transformation. And this comes after the Olympia, where he said he wouldn't be closed-minded to coming back and competing if there was some money involved, if the price was right, whatever, that he's not totally closed the door on competing. And again, just like we had this conversation about Chris Bumstead, 40 now in the grand scheme of professional bodybuilding is not necessarily too old or past the prime or too late to come back. 40 in bodybuilding now is relatively young, and there's a lot of top guys that are either close to 40 or in their 40s. You've got Brandon Curry, of course, he's in his 40s. He was just top 4. Andrew Jackson, Samson, Dauda are both in their late 30s. I believe Hadi is like 36. Derek, I believe, is the youngest of those top guys. He's just 30. But do I think Flex could come back, still try to do the Open Olympia, and have a significant impact on that lineup? I do, especially after what we saw this year. These shorter guys that come in with nice shape, really good conditioning, they're doing extremely well. Derek and Hadi being 1 and 2 is a perfect example of that. Now, I don't know how close to his prime Flex would actually be, because I think back of a prime Flex Lewis, just a bigger version of that on an open stage, I think would do really well right now. But how close to his prime would he be if he came back? That's kind of the X factor that we don't really know the answer to. He might not be 100%. But when I see these updates like this from Flex, he's still totally got not just the foundation, but he's got that foundation. He's still got that muscle. He's still got that conditioning. He's still got the ability, I think, to compete and do very well if he wanted to do open. I see an update like this from Flex, and I don't think, wow, this guy he's retired. I don't see a retired bodybuilder. I see a guy that still has it. And I do like a good comeback, and I think over the next couple years in bodybuilding, between these potential crossovers of guys coming from 212 to open, guys coming from classic to open, I know that Keon has even said his goal is to one day be an open bodybuilder and compete at the Open Olympia. And I think Keon, and I've said this before, has a really similar structure to Derek, who just won. So I think over the next 5 years or so, we could see some really exciting things happen in the world of bodybuilding that I think will be game changers. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon for more videos like this one. And as always, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at NickStrengthPower, my Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power, my secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.